guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tank12, having to call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where today we are reviewing the Skoda T56 because it was also polled quite far at the top. I think it was the second most requested tank. After that, we're going to take a look at the Skoda T27 or the 122TM. Now, I think with the poll, I created basically some of the most overpowered tanks, at least with the AMBT and the Skoda T56, and it's clear that you guys are interested in these because they do perform well. You always have to keep in mind that World of Tanks, premium tanks will get better, and older premium tanks will suffer. So that means all of the older premium tanks like the FCM50T or maybe the 112, these vehicles will eventually not be as good as they once were. With the 112 though, this tank did receive a buff, the FCM never did, and thus these are some tanks that I would really be very careful of buying. So just go to T56 because it is in a very powerful state, pretty overpowered in my opinion. This vehicle will probably do fine in the future unless they bring out even more powerful tanks at tier 9, and this thing will get balanced out by being power crept by tier 9 vehicles. So what do you get with this tank? Basically, the Czech heavy tanks, they have a 130mm gun that is a tier 10 gun on a tier 8 vehicle that just absolutely destroys everything. The most ridiculous thing about this gun is its alpha damage. The alpha damage, as you can see, is at 460. This is the alpha damage of a tier 8 heavy tank. Do we want to check some tier 10 heavy tanks, for example? So you can get a little bit of a feeling what that alpha is like. So here we have the 60 TP, 750. It's quite a step up. Then we have the Rinoceronte, 490. That's only 30 HP more. But how about we take a look at maybe the AMX50B? That's 400. You have a tier 8 vehicle with the alpha damage of 460. That is the big selling point for these Czech heavy tanks because they have incredible burst potential. This is also an autoloader, so you get 2 shells, and both shells together do 460 damage with a single shot, and together you have a potential of doing 920 damage. If you have a very high roll of 575, which is the max roll you can have, you can do above 1000 damage. Basically 1150 damage with 2 shots. That is a Scorpion G that you can clip in about, 7 seconds for both shots, or it's about 4 seconds because the first shot you can just immediately fire, second shot it'll take you 3.5 seconds. So what are the drawbacks? Because having this massive amount of alpha damage will have to have some drawbacks, right? Well, your AP shell doesn't have very good shell penetration, 208mm, and your premium AP shell, no APCR shell, only has, now keep this in mind, this is only with a very big, I'm not even sure what it's called, with a very big exclamation mark, 248mm of penetration, which is more than enough at tier 8, but at tier 9 and 10, which you'll be fighting tier 9 and 10 vehicles in this tank, it's going to be a bit difficult to really reliably be able to penetrate these tanks. At least we have that. But still, yeah, shell velocity is identical, and the shell damage is just incredible with this 130mm gun. Yeah, rate of fire is also not too bad. It takes you about 22 seconds to reload the gun fully with the right crew and with the right equipment setup. Gun traverse for a heavy tank is not very good, or for a heavy tank it's okay, 28.47 degrees per second, and there's like 8 degrees of gun depression with the vehicle. 8 degrees of gun depression is fine. That's about the norm that you should want to have at in World of Tanks in the year 2022. 15 degrees of gun elevation is fine as well, but the aim time and the dispersion both are a bit bad. But since you'll be playing this tank more in an aggressive role either way, because of the very aggressive nature of the firepower characteristics that we have right here, you won't really have to worry too much about the aiming and dispersion unless you're trying to be a sniper, which I don't really see the point in. Either way, it has 1,500 hit points. I have the additional 50 hit points because of the field modifications, which we'll take a look in as well. And you have 100 millimeters of frontal armor, 70 on the side, 70 at the rear. Nothing too big, nothing too crazy, but the angling is done in a way that is very, very nice. So you're going to be bouncing shells that probably should have went through 100 millimeters armor thickness, but because it's very nicely angled, it's quite sturdy. Same goes for the turret. 220 millimeters of turret armor with heat shields on the side and spaced armor right here. This tank will absorb a lot of damage if it's in a hull down position. So world tanks, hull down meta, we know the drill. We don't like it, at least I don't like it, but that's the way it is. Then we have the Commander's Hatch, which is the major weak spot on top of the turret. Other than that, 95 on the side, 70 on the rear. Nothing you can really do about the Skoda T56 in a hull down position if you do not hit the cupola, or if you do have a lot of premium penetration. Other than that, it's quite difficult to take care of this tank, especially if he's moving forward and backwards to the side to the wiggle dance. The tank itself, its mobility, on the other hand, is a bit lacking. Thankfully, it's lacking. It weighs 50 tons, so it's in a medium kind of range. It's not too heavy, to be fair, for a heavy tank. The engine power is quite low, 715. That's with the turbocharger, so it's going to be even below that. So it's 650. And the specific power to weight ratio is quite terrible, as you can see right here. The top speed on the vehicle is 35 kilometers per hour top speed. That used to be very good with the T110E5 back in the days. It used to be a mobile heavy tank. Nowadays, for a 35 kilometers per hour top speed, yeah, that's not very good, to be fair, because we have other heavy tanks that are a lot faster. For example, the Bisonte, 50 kilometers per hour. The Emil, 19, that's about the same. But we have other heavy tanks that are just a lot more mobile, and most of them are Soviet, I think. Or I'm just mistaken. Either way, I think the mobility with the turbocharger makes the vehicle quite nice to play, in a very comfortable position where you can still move and get from one place to another. The traverse speed is fine, it's not the best. But either way, I think the gun and the survivability aspect of the tank, they are a very nice package. And if you have that little bit of mobility added on top, you're going to be quite a mobile and effective killing machine up close. Concealment wise, the tank is a heavy. You do not expect a lot of view range. You do not expect a lot of concealment. The view range is at 370 meters base, so nothing to write home about. And if we take a look at the field modifications, this is the way I went, and I'm thinking about it, because I think right here, this would, like, lightweight suspension is usually the thing I go for. Gives you better traverse speed, but it does detract from your top speed. Because it takes so long for you to reach top speed, because of the very bad specific power to weight ratio, I went with all-terrain suspension, which gives me a plus 7% bonus on maintaining speed. So that allows me to be faster. Obviously, with parallax adjustment for smaller aim circle, and I went with periscope electric drive to increase the view range. But to be fair, right here, since you're playing a heavy tank, you could go for sound insulation for less stun duration, but it kind of detracts from your view range. So if you are willing to take a hit for less view range, well, go for it. I usually don't like that, and that's why I went against it. Finally, with the last slot where you can choose like a special category, I went with mobility. You could also go with firepower. That's completely dependent on how you play this vehicle. I went for mobility because I want that additional 5 kilometers per hour top speed, and I want to have more specific power to weight ratio, which I'll get right here with the, well, okay, you'd still get the 10% engine power added on top of that, but you get the plus 1 kilometers per hour top speed. But to be fair, if you wanted to play this tank mainly in like cities and you don't really care about running out and being mobile, which I wouldn't really suggest you do. I would still hope you invest a little bit in mobility because it's still going to be very important. I went for vertical stabilizer, which is self-explanatory. I went for the turbo class 1, and I went for improved ventilations to give me that additional plus 1% and use that specialized slot, because I didn't go for survivability. That's something you could go for, but I don't really go for additional survivability on a lot of my heavy tanks. Getting me plus 10% HP would be quite nice, but generally speaking, I think having just everything raised by a little bit is worth more for me. So I went with improved ventilations. What you can also do is you can go for firepower, right? That's based specialization. Go for improved aiming, because you can see that your dispersion values are quite terrible. And you can go for improved rotation mechanism as well, because it'll give you better gun traverse, turret traverse, track traverse. These are things that are quite important, and a lot of times when you do not want to get circled by vehicles. And I think that might also be very helpful to have. That's just my personal recommendation. As always, you can tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what kind of equipment you'd be running, and I would be really interested to see what kind of vehicle you play this as. I play it as a heavy tank that has extreme burst potential damage, that really I only play it for the gun, so I don't really care too much about concealment or spotting. I just want to be somewhere where I can do a lot of damage, keep hull down, protect myself from incoming fire, and reload as fast as I can, be as accurate as I can at the same time, and hopefully get there fast enough that I do not get caught outside somewhere. That's how I play my Skoda T56, and to be fair, I've had quite a lot of success with it. Damage caused to enemies in a game is like 2,459. Shows you how completely broken this is, because this is about the average you do in a tier 9 vehicle. If we just go over to another auto loader like the Lorraine, you can see it comes close to it. It's not on the same level, but maybe just because I'm really good in my Lorraine. No, I'm just kidding. But these are not the numbers you usually see for tier 8s. 2,400 is quite a massive uptick. Maybe in other autoloaders you'll see that, but usually you don't see that being that close, because that is basically on par with tier 9 vehicles. If we go over to some tier 9 vehicles, for example the E75, which I played a lot, you can see that the E75 doesn't even come close to it. The VK, maybe because I played that a bit better than my E75, the Moisian as well, but that's on tier 9 levels, and that's quite scary if you think about it. So, moving on, let's jump into some gameplay, and hopefully I can give you guys a final verdict at the end. I think it's pretty clear. This is a pretty good vehicle, and yeah, we still have to talk about it, and we have to talk about the consequences of this tank being in the game. Okay, so first gameplay, we are playing on Ghost Town in a tier 8 matchup, and yeah, the tank is pretty damn good. You'll see that in this gameplay. 208 millimeters of penetration. I always have the feeling that on big guns with 130 millimeters or 122 or 120, like having low amount of pen is somehow not as problematic as with 90 millimeter gun and having 212 millimeters of pen. Somehow the big gun is just way more reliable most of the time, and you just have the feeling that you're able to punch through more armor. So, we're playing on Ghost Town. I make a move, quite a daring, aggressive play into the middle, and we have a little bit of a meme moment. This T2065 is riding me, and I'm losing a majority of my HP. And basically, I'm down to 1/3 of my HP, a little bit more than a third. And what is really weird about this game so far is that there is a light tank with me in this ditch, which doesn't make any sense. But either way, we move on. And here we can see the massive burst potential of this tank, also the turret armor that we have. As I mentioned prior, yeah, the cupola is a weak spot, and they are working on that cupola. But look at that damage output. We hit the M4Y once, we hit the T26E4 once, and we basically just do 1,000 damage in 2 shots. That's the disgusting part about this tank. With this position, if we can just always wiggle around and keep our, cupola from being shot, we can basically just do whatever we want to do with these guys. So I'm trying to keep, trying to block the incoming shot from the Bisonte with this little wall or structure in front of me. And at the same time, I'm also trying to put one into the T26E4. That T26E4 is going to have a really bad day. But we also are not going to have a good day against this Bisonte. But look at this T26E4. He gives us a little bit of his side armor. We penetrate him for 463. And at the same time, we set him on fire. And that poor guy burns up, and now we only have an M4 and a Bisonte. And this IS-3A is playing very aggressively with me here, where we are basically bringing the fight to the enemy, and the M4Y with its very big weak spot on top is just not really able to do a lot, and the IS-3 just takes out the Bisonte. So now it's this poor guy against us. I unfortunately hit the IS-3. It's not the last time that this will happen, and I bounce off the weak spot on the M4Y, but the IS-3 is going to take care of that guy in just a second. So that's how quick you can basically win a flank. That's how fast you can take a very important part of the map. When you have the turret armor, when you have a lot of different nice things with your tank, decent mobility as well. Extreme dangerous gun, and now I'm just waiting for the guard to make a move, put one into him, track him, 457, he loses 33 HP, or 33% of his HP, and yeah, we are at 3,000 damage, very casual 3,000 damage. We didn't have to do a lot, we didn't have to press the 2 key, and that is basically the history and the story of the Skoda T56. If you know a little bit about, if you know a bit about the game, if you know how to play the game, you're basically going to be just fine. And the accuracy, to be fair, it seems to be a lie. I have another gameplay that we're going to take a look at in just a second, where I'm mainly sniping with the tank, and it works out, it functions. So we have a Skoda TVP 100 up there, 2 rounds into him, very easy, 522 damage, an additional 384, and the shell velocity of 1,020 meters per second is also pretty damn good. So you're looking at a tank that basically has way too many good features and no real drawbacks. So that's what makes tanks overpowered. And this is one of the most overpowered tanks in the game. I didn't own this one before. I got it with the Christmas loot boxes because that's where they sold this tank actually. I didn't buy the tank prior. Look at that FV, do some crazy stunts, and I hit the IS-3A. But it's just one of those tanks that, yeah, it should have never been introduced as a premium tank at tier 8. But it is in the game. They're going to sell it again probably soon. And I just want to make an honest review on the vehicle. And if I had the choice between this and the IS-6 or the KB5, I'd have to say this would probably be the choice I would go for, because of its raw power and potential. So we're going to take a look at the other gameplay where we're mainly sniping, and you'd think that it doesn't really work with this tank, but you'd be very surprised. because this tank actually does work in a sniping role. Okay, we have 3 artillery pieces, we have tier 9 vehicles, and a matchup where you basically have a little bit of everything. You have tier 7s, you have some tier 8s, and you have the 3 tier 9 vehicles that they put into this matchup. And basically, if you're in a heavy tank and you don't really have the best kind of gun depression, you probably go over to F9 and you try to hug the rocks. But it's a bit of a dangerous play because a lot of tank destroyers nowadays, they move into B9 or into the B8 area where they are going to be able to hit you. So you have to be very careful, especially if you are able to actually breach the D9 and D0 area, because that's usually the killing zone where they get you into this zone, and as soon as you're in there, you're going to get absolutely demolished by anything sitting at B8, anything sitting at C5, and anything sitting at C8 as well, because there are quite a few places where you can be. So basically what I try to do here is, I know that there's nobody in the middle because we have full control of the middle right now, and I'm just trying to you know, see if I can snipe with this tank. I remember it has like 0.37 or 0.38 accuracy at 100 meters, so it's not gonna work out very well, but I thought, you know, as long as I have targets, why not try it? Because we have some with the M2Y over here, who's getting absolutely wrecked by the Emil. We have quite a few guys, you know, holding this position, so if I can do some damage and take some HP off the enemy, why not? Because it certainly looks like that I have enough targets to shoot at. I hit the STA-1 for a disappointing 430. Yes, very disappointing, because 460 is the standard alpha. And I hit the Astron Rex for 394, which is even more disappointing, but I set him on fire. So 2 shots perfectly hit the targets, and you have a 1,042 meters per second shell velocity, or 24 or something like that. 1,020 meters per second shell velocity. So basically we're in a position where we can just take pop shots. Nobody's gonna spot us unless they move closer, and we can basically just hit anything and penetrate most of the tanks that we have in this matchup. So 208 millimeters of penetration is not going to be a problem, but it will be a problem at tier 10 when you have to go up against certain tier 10 vehicles. But at the moment, I think it's a bit ridiculous that this tank works as a sniper, and it's not something I expected. But I didn't expect this tank to actually come to World Tanks. It turns out that I'm quite naive that something like this wouldn't be added into the game, because it's quite a bit ridiculous in terms of powerful being too powerful in World Tanks. Because in the end, having this burst potential of 1,000 damage with 3.5 seconds or 4 seconds, where you are able to unload the 1,000 HP worth damage on your enemies, that's just pretty brutal, and I don't think that should be part of the game. But I'm not the one who designs this game, and I can only either play the tank or not play the tank and have to play against the vehicle. For me personally, I don't really play the Skoda T56 often. I try to refrain from using this tank too often because it's just really powerful. But I've noticed that my win rate in certain tier 8 tanks has dropped significantly because, very bad roll by the way right there, but my win rate has decreased significantly on some tier 8 premium tanks because they're just no longer really able to take part in the game, or they have to play very passively. And I think one of these tanks, the Skoda T56, is probably one of the main reasons also why that has happened, because this massive power creeping that has been going on at tier 8 and is starting now at tier 9. This Tiger 2, I mean, he is in a very bad position, yes, but, you know, he was just free meat for me. I finally get spotted by the shot for tier 4, and you can see, just as I mentioned, the heavy tanks went into this killing zone, making the game once again interesting for us. because now the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV, the Scharfenführer 4, and the Löwe have an open field. We had a T28 who was at B9. We had the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV who was at B4, no, B8, and we had the Scharfenführer at C8. So exactly as I predicted it. If you go into this zone, you're going to get absolutely destroyed. Maybe I should have warned them, but in the end, they have to play their game by their own rules, and they just have to kind of adapt. So for us now, the most important part about this is to actually secure the flanks. We don't have enough gun depression to play this ridgeline, and I don't want to expose myself too much. So I do decide to actually just try to spot these guys and snipe at the same time, so that we can win the other flank, because I think that's going to be quite essential for us to win this game. If we can win the other flank, we can probably put some pressure on these guys that are sitting on the 9 and 0 line, because the Löwe can't really go anywhere else at the moment, and as long as we kind of keep an eye on these guys here, we should be doing fine. And I am feeling quite confident in this tank. I don't really have any doubts that we can hold this place, or we can't hold this place. So I'm making some moves. I'm moving around here, and I'm also waiting for the perfect opportunity to take out some tanks over on the other side. We take out the T25-2. We knock out the SD82 with a well-placed shot, which were where we predicted where the SD81 was going, and now we have the entire western flank open. So yeah, this tank, I mean, it's very powerful, it's really OP, and it's not good for the game. Never was good for the game, and it will never be good for the game because of the way that they have introduced it into World Tanks with these characteristics. I think if you want to have a tank like this, you really have to nerf the turret armor. It needs to be a lot weaker in terms of protection, because then maybe you can think about introducing 1,000 damage burst potential with two rounds, but that's probably also where the problem is. Maybe making it like a single shot tank, or just reducing the damage, the alpha damage, would have been completely fine. But since they always want to have something new to make people buy, this obviously makes a lot of sense that they go down this route. So right there, we hit the Löwe once for 440, and now we're just chasing down the M12 and the Löwe. And I don't really think I have to show anything else regarding this tank. At tier 10, it doesn't perform as well as it does here, but it's still quite a formidable vehicle, as long as you have tanks that you can actually penetrate with your 208 millimeters of penetration, because the 248 millimeters of pen on the premium AP shell is not going to be cutting it even at tier 10. It's going to give you a bigger chance of going through, but it's not going to guarantee you a penetration on a lot of these tanks. So you still have to be a little bit wary and need to know the weak spots. But at tier 8 and 9, where the majority of the tanks don't have the amazing armor that we have at tier 10, for example, on some vehicles, or just on some very exclusive tanks you have very good armor, you're not going to run into too many problems. The mobility, even though it is on paper 35 kilometers per hour top speed, and the horsepower per weight or power to weight ratio is not the best, it still will get you decently fast from one place to another. And with the turbo, which I am using, I have 40 kilometers per hour top speed, and I feel like I'm confident enough to get to the places where I need to be and do my part. And it just kind of makes me sad a little bit, because a lot of other tanks at tier 8, some at tier 7, they just don't have a chance. They get bursts, they get bursted up completely. I've seen players running a 3-man platoon with the Skoda T56, and yeah, I mean, that's not really something that I would recommend, because it's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, the story continues of ridiculous tanks at tier 8. It's going to change to the story of ridiculous tanks at tier 9. And generally speaking, it's a very powerful tank, very overpowered because of the burst potential. And in the end, for me personally, is it a good premium tank? Of course it is, because it's going to print money. It's going to allow you to do a lot of damage, to win a lot of games. But it just kind of destroys the entire ecosystem of world tanks completely over again. And I didn't buy it. I didn't buy premium tanks the last 2 years because of my not hatred, but my disdain of wargaming, and I didn't want to support a company financially anymore that doesn't really care about the game or the players. And I got this with the Christmas bundle or the Christmas loot boxes, and it's completely filthy. Yeah, it's a very powerful tank. If you can pick it up, well, it's not a bad tank per se. Can you live with the fact that it's such a powerful tank? Probably you can, because you've faced it several times. And I think, I don't want to judge anyone buying this tank because I own it as well. My problem lies with wargaming, that they release something into the game like this. Because in the end, we are the players. We should not be held accountable for, decisions they make on the game, for using what is actually in the game. But they should be held accountable for things that they have added into the game that shouldn't be a part of the game. But that's just my point of view. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think of the Skoda T56. I think it's completely nuts. I really like the VZ55. Like, I enjoy the gameplay of these vehicles. I just think that they are not a very good addition to the game. But at least hull armor wise, you can usually take care of them. And if you pay a little bit of attention to the weak spot, the cupola, you can take care of them as well. It's just as soon as he or she or whatever, they start focusing you with their guns, it's not going to be very pleasant experience if you don't have any armor. So, hope you guys did enjoy this review. As always, I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.